our work has focused heavily over the years on English language training. This has become a significant part of our portfolio, and for obvious reasons. It's a gateway. It's a gateway whether to apply for scholarships, whether to seek an entry-level job, to seek a promotion, to try to study internationally, and so forth. So we offer many kinds of English language for different ages, and that also was the focus of our M&E pilot study. We wanted to start there. But the intent is to take that experience and to apply it to other training programs, to take our experience in this pilot study and apply it to the wide range of Amideast training programs. In terms of who we serve, this is of course at the heart of our work. In the next slide. We might impact people's lives at critical stages, or sometimes over several life stages. We work with students, we work with teachers, with university grads, with professionals of different ages who often face significant challenges. And certainly something like a pandemic highlighted those challenges in various ways. The pilot study, as you'll see, focused on a sample of teens and adults, so somewhere in the middle here. But again, we're looking at how this experience can apply across the different programs we offer, across and for the different audiences that we serve. And next, we, as an education and training organization, we thought it's very important to also mention our learning and teaching approach, which is that of active learning, and the student-centered classroom, characterized by student interaction, engagement, critical thinking, and all those elements that really focus on the learner above everything else. It's important also to note that this has defined what we do and what we aim to do for a long time, and well before the pandemic. And as you'll see, this has informed the objectives of the pilot study. If this is at the core of what we're hoping to achieve with our learners of with different backgrounds and ages, and certainly with our teachers. We also think this experience will really allow us to take this active learning approach and to more consciously, more directly apply it to the different training programs that Amideast does beyond English language training. And next, I want to just very briefly tell you about our experience since March of 2020. So in the next slide, like for many organizations, the pandemic shook things up for us, and very quickly, very unexpectedly. Although we had established our own learning management system and had been developing this capacity, COVID certainly put this all to the test and pushed us in this direction quickly and in some ways unforgivingly, including in terms of using our normal M&E practices. We knew we had to rethink, refocus, and there was no looking backwards, right? So just to give you an idea of the variety of courses and programs that Amideast knew that we knew needed to go online and to continue somehow, both to finish courses that were in progress and to launch new ones, to launch new sessions. This gives you an idea. Of course, English language is the main area in terms of the courses and programs we offer, but in these other areas as well. We needed to look at ways that, again, we could continue our work and using the tagline that we also began using and truly believe in, learning never stops, whether for individual courses or larger programs. And this involved a true team effort and many different steps. In the next slide, just for those wondering about our own platform and tools that we used for our e-learning, you'll see that we have our own customized LMS, Moodle based, which had been developed for some time we have our own e-learning expert that had been working on this a lot. Once the pandemic hit, I think he was working 24 hours, 7 days a week. And within our Moodle LMS, we have a virtual classroom, big blue button. But as with a lot of with all of the work that we do, we know that we continually need to be nimble. We need to be flexible. We need to respond to different realities. So, for example, in locations where due to bandwidth and internet speed, Google Classroom or Zoom made more sense, we also use those. And that's an example of how our teams continually needed to problem solve in order to make sure that our learners were able to access the courses and programs as well as possible. And also in the next slide, I wanted to highlight that, of course, this represented a huge learning curve, including with different course models and different delivery formats. There was a lot going on at once. And I have to say, in terms of terminology also, it's funny in this experience and also in working and doing more and more research, there is overlap in these terms, in these concepts, sometimes confusion. But in terms of how we're using them here, we'll make reference to face-to-face for the sake of comparison in different ways, because that's our default. And I have to mention that in terms of our learners, our audiences, and based on different surveys that we've done, that is truly still the preferred form of learning. Maybe changing a bit, but we've received this feedback in different ways, including during the pandemic, and many who missed the face-to-face experience in our different offices and centers. But then we've also been working on blended models in which you still had the face-to-face experience, but that then learners were also working on asynchronous tasks, offline and online, to complement that face-to-face experience. All right. We're using hybrid here as it is used in the field and in literature often, and that is hybrid being a combination of different learning components to create the best learning experience possible. And in our case, and in many cases, to replace the face-to-face experience. So when the pandemic happened, that actually early on became our default, a hybrid model in which we had both a synchronous for the larger portion of hours, of training hours, and then an asynchronous component where students worked independently on different assignments, tasks, projects to directly complement the synchronous experience. And we'll come back to these often because, of course, this has been a very important part of our pilot study and our learning experience. Okay, and next, just to give you a very quick idea of the speed with which we had to act from March 2020 on, 2 months later, Amideast did have over 300 online classes running in 10 countries. Again, different different sizes, different numbers of courses, etc. With close to 4,000 students enrolled, this number would go up significantly. And a lot going on at once. And also we need to take into account that throughout 2020, there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of change of restrictions related to COVID. There were, across our different countries, there were total lockdowns, and then there were partial lockdowns, and then there was an opening up where we were able to sometimes go back to the office, our centers, do some face-to-face teaching again, but then sometimes things would close down again. So it was, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, it was a very changing landscape across our different countries. And our teams were dealing with that in their program planning. And then of course, we've laid out here the core steps involved in preparing for this, in preparing for online, for virtual courses and programs. But of course, the process was not always this neat or linear. And I wanted to highlight that Amal and I were mostly involved in numbers 5 through 7, critical parts in terms of teacher training. We knew that we needed to act on that very quickly, and so we quickly planned online orientations, workshops, support that brought together teachers from across the region in different ways. So we also learned a lot from that experience. And very importantly, we realized early on that this was quite an opportunity to, again, to rethink, to refocus our whole M&E approach and practices. And from that came the M&E pilot project. Amal, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Elena. Now let's share with you what we were thinking at that time, you know, when we are like rapidly transmitting to online, and we wanted to make sure that we are doing this without missing out on our training quality and effectiveness, and our kind of really known feature of leading active learning and student-centered approaches in our programs. So we wanted to make sure that we are carefully monitoring the transition to online programs. So we put together this pilot study, and we really had in mind to not just evaluate, but because we very much believe that monitoring is quite needed for teachers as they are preparing their capacity for going online. So we wanted to give time for teachers to monitor teachers and to monitor their online capacities as they are developed. And as Elena said, we were faced with programs running in different sites, you know, multiple sites, different offices, you know, in 11 countries. So we were alternating between different modes of teaching and learning, between hybrid, face-to-face, synchronous, asynchronous, blended. So we wanted to monitor this. We wanted to monitor these hybrid modes of teaching and learning. And when the time comes, we will give it for evaluation lenses to assess level of difficulty in conducting active learner-centered activities virtually. We wanted to really inform ourselves about how sufficient the orientation, the teacher training, the capacity building, how effective for really getting teachers and learners ready for this transition. And whether this really in any way, like going online and delivering our programs virtually, whether this is in any way affects the effectiveness of our program as reflected in the learners' scores on the end of the program assessment. We wanted also to learn whether there are further needs for capacity building that we might need to emphasize, better ways of orientation for our learners, better ways of really capitalizing on our technology and preparing them for a better use of technology, both for teachers and learners, of course. Whether program management, coordination needs to be enhanced in any way to feed into really this transition online. And as we are doing all of this, we are keeping an eye on an M&E system, both process and toolkit. We wanted to pilot an M&E system for Amideast to use in really monitoring and evaluating our virtual training programs. So we wanted to put this system under piloting before we are streamlining it in monitoring and evaluating our virtual training programs beyond the EL programs, adapting it to different training programs for different professional skills training. So this is actually our scope, the pilot study scope at that time. And we moved from here to the very first step that we needed to decide on. Literature actually is telling us that there are many constructs when it comes to planning and implementing virtual teaching and virtual learning. We had to select core constructs to focus our M&E pilot study on. Which constructs we are going to study here. And by constructs, we're talking about abilities for teachers and for learners. So online instruction constructs and e-learning constructs. So that was actually kind of like really a teamwork on really selecting from literature what are the constructs that we'll focus on. And very much we were focusing on the constructs that would serve our signature feature of promoting active learning and student-centered activities. So we wanted very much to monitor and evaluate active learning online, how teacher is really planning for active learning online, and how learners are managing their e-learning, their active e-learning online. We wanted to include motivating learners online for teachers. What do teachers do for motivating the learners online? And we selected the same mirror construct for e-learning. So we wanted also to check about what affects learners' motivation and independence online. In terms of time online, managing time online, how do teachers are conscious about this? Whether they're approaching time management in the same way that they used to do face-to-face, whether they are capable of really planning their lesson in a way that really give room for online activities, and how much this is also reflected in the e-learning for learners, time commitment for learners, how much they are committed to their online classes. And since our, as Elena pinpointed, since our approaches had to be hybrid between synchronous and asynchronous, so we wanted to make sure that offline time is really well utilized under the notion of this continuity of learning.
Oh. Helena, do you want to take over for a minute? I think her internet was down, and it seemed that she may have left the meeting.
Sure. I don't have the slides. She had the slides, but I'll continue here. You'll see that we used a variety of tools for the pilot study. Tools for, of course, to gather data from learners, but also from teachers and from managers. We really wanted a wide, range of perspectives and data about this very new experience in terms of at this level of planning online and virtual courses. So, and for example, for teachers and managers, we did both monitoring checklists and surveys. So the checklists so we didn't go right to the surveys towards the end of a course or program, but early on we used checklists to check how things are going, to check teachers' comfort level, their skills, and managers having tools to also monitor that and gather information early on in terms of what was going well, what were the greatest challenges, and so forth. There we are. Amal, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. I'm just trying. I'm sorry about that. It's the internet connection, it seems. Yes.
Okay. Yes, and you were breaking up before as well. Hopefully it's better now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you need to move to a different location there. Anyway, I was just commenting briefly on the tools, but
Yes.
anyway,
Okay.
I'll let you continue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
See, these are the challenges that our students face
That's
as
right.
well.
Yes, we wanted to give you life challenges. Yes, that's right. Yes. This is the part that we were talking about, the constructs here. We were just wanted to give you a view of the construct that we selected for this pilot study. We were actually talking about the planning of the offline learning. I really have a problem with actually having it fully screen. We'll see if we can actually move it here. Okay. So we wanted to see that planning offline learning for teachers and for learners as well, how teachers are planning their offline learning and how learners are managing their learning offline. This is kind of really part and parcel of the virtual learning approach, is to plan this continuity between online and offline, and how teachers are capable of doing this. We also selected the use of technology as a construct, and monitoring e-learning for teachers found to be a very important construct also to study in this pilot study, both in terms of how much learners are capable of following programs online and progressing on the learning outcomes. So monitoring e-learning also was one of the constructs. For learners, we wanted to look at their ability to self-evaluate their progress and communicate their learning difficulties with teachers. And at the end also, we wanted to look at assessment online, assessing learning online for teachers, and how teachers were planning this, how they are implementing assessment online, and the study environment for learners was also one of the 7 constructs we selected for learners. Okay, so we ended up developing a toolkit for monitoring and evaluation purposes. So we had a monitoring checklist for teacher and for manager. And we were using this monitoring checklist to generate discussion for the bi-weekly teacher-manager meetings. And we wanted to use these monitoring checklists for at least 1/3, the first third of the program. So we wanted to allow time for teachers and managers to monitor capacities as they are developing before we move towards the end of the program for using our evaluation tools, teacher survey, manager survey, learner survey, and a teacher focus group. We also, because we had young learners in some of our programs, so we developed a parent survey for young learners only, so that we can validate and verify what our young learners are telling us about this online experience. For the M&E plan, as you know, as you see here, we just wanted to give you, we'll put this all together in front of you. So we have our different purposes, and we have our tools aligned to the purpose, and we have the timing of our data collection here. And throughout this pilot study, we were piloting this system, the M&E system, both in its process and toolkit, so that we can unfold it later on for Amideast virtual training programs. Okay, back to you, Elena, for the teachers' profiles.
Okay, we thought it's also important to before giving you just brief highlights of the teacher survey and the results we have to date on the teacher survey. We thought it's important to give you an idea of who our teachers are, because they come with a wide range of different experiences and backgrounds. There's a lot of diversity in this. There are a lot of differences in their and of course in their teaching and learning contexts, and also in their online teaching proficiency. Also, I have languages here because our teachers are bilingual, sometimes trilingual, sometimes more, being fluent in English and at least one other language. So they bring all of that into their English language teaching, which was the focus here. For example, here you have a teacher in Gaza who is at least bilingual, if not trilingual, including fluency in English and Arabic, and has worked with a lot of young learners, teens, and adult programs. But in terms of online teaching proficiency and confidence level, this varies a lot and varied a lot. And many of our teachers had limited or no direct online teaching experience. They might have had learning experience, but the online teaching experience was limited in many cases. So we took all of this into account in planning programs and certainly in planning the M&E pilot, because we knew we could learn a lot from this experience. I have to say that our teachers have really embraced this experience and developed lots of new skills quite rapidly. Okay, in the next two slides, I just want to give you really a taste of some of the responses from our teacher survey, and the samples here we wanted to focus more on the areas of difficulty. In the tools, in the survey, we used a scale that went from performances carried out with ease, performances with some difficulties, performances with great difficulties, and then too difficult to perform. So with ease, the performances with ease, it's interesting because a lot of those were in the areas of planning, timing, even technology, which the teachers already had maybe some foundation, but then really focused on that very quickly. So it's funny that those areas, it wasn't surprising that those areas fell more under the performances carried out with ease category. If you look at it overall, you see that the greater challenges are not in the planning, but with the delivery, particularly in terms of delivering courses that truly focus on active learning, on student-centered learning. We see that, you have a lot of emerging skills here, but when you look at performances with great difficulties or too difficult to perform, whether through hybrid or blended courses, you have things like to manage a flipped classroom and student-centered activities, to use technology to encourage independent learners. And even under blended, they have managed flipped classrooms and student-centered activities under too difficult to perform. This is interesting, but also maybe not too surprising. A flipped classroom approach has been part of our desired practices for some time. But if you look at, in terms of teacher development, for me, it's really kind of a higher order skill to really be able to do that consistently and well. It really requires a process of development. And it's also interesting that, for example, under the blended under the blended model, that some teachers found this even more challenging than under a hybrid model, which uses synchronous and asynchronous completely on our platform. And perhaps that has to do with more tools that lend themselves to a true flipped learning approach, which is very desirable. I think most of you might be familiar with that, but a flipped learning approach moves away from the traditional approach of the teacher providing the content, the information in the face-to-face or virtual interaction, and then the students then just doing kind of exercises to complement that. In a flipped approach, you flip that in that students handle the content independently through videos, through readings, etc. And then they come together for either the face-to-face or in this case, the virtual classroom, live virtual classroom, to engage with that content, to practice applying it, to do problem solving, to do projects. So that's a really effective and for us, a desirable practice. But maybe in terms of applying a flipped classroom approach online, that the tools there lend themselves towards that, and also maybe there is a more neat division in the components between the synchronous and asynchronous. At any rate, this truly, this truly gives us, and will continue to give us, some really meaningful information in terms of what's needed for teacher training and development. And in the next one, this focused more, these items in our survey were focusing more on the synchronous components. In the next chart, you have just samples of responses that focus more on the asynchronous, right? On the asynchronous component, where students, learners need to be independent. They need to have discipline. They need to focus on their own development, both away from the face-to-face or virtual classroom and during it. So, and making that link. So, in a way, this wasn't surprising and actually revealed what we expected. We're seeing, during the pandemic and beyond, we're seeing a real paradigm shift. And we're having to, which was always there, but we're having to really think about that more and act on it in terms of our teachers and learners. So there's a paradigm shift from, of course, the face-to-face model to different virtual models. There's a shift from face-to-face to either a blended model or a hybrid model. And then within that, there's also a shift from maybe just or primarily a focus on synchronous, a face-to-face, to one that is combined with asynchronous, right? So it implies different layers and stages of teacher development here. But we knew that we have to. The asynchronous, a big challenge here was, how do we go beyond both teachers and learners viewing this just as homework? It's not homework. Something
Is it only me? Or
might fall into two categories. And one is in terms of teachers and where they are and where they need to go. One is in terms of practices that need further development. One is practices and needs that existed before, right? That are a part of that teacher's repertoire, but these were further revealed and exposed by shifting to online and virtual teaching. And teachers themselves have commented on this, both in the focus group and in other ways, right? That this experience has really forced them to look at not only the online skills that they need, the e-learning skills that they need, but also just their practices overall. And for example, the flipped learning approach. Again, many had been focusing on that and developing that, but this revealed that much more needs to be done in that area in order for it to be implemented successfully in different models. And the second category, beyond practices that existed before, general teaching practices, are of course practices of specific relevance for e-learning. And that might be aligning, for example, aligning the synchronous and asynchronous components more smoothly, having more continuity. And another area, online assessment. So you have these two categories that are really critical for our focus on online the teacher training and development.
Helena, I'm here.
Amal?
I don't know whether you can see the screen.
I can't.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yes, I'm just trying to share a screen again. Okay, we encountered an internet problem with internet connectivity, and we are trying to share a screen again. So I just would like while we are doing this, I'd like to compliment on what Elena has just shared, that highlights from teacher survey here. When we are sharing with you the learners, highlights from the learner survey, you would see that many of these areas have been emphasized actually from what learners shared with us about their the problems or the performances that they have some difficulties with, and the problems that they have some great, or the performances that they have great difficulties with. You can see that there are some kind of verification of what teachers are saying about challenges in really planning and implementing active learning and student-centered activities, and what learners are telling us about their the performances that they have some difficulties with. I'm just trying now to.
Well, I just shared my screen. Can you see the
Okay.
slides? I wasn't sure if it would work. Can you see the slides?
Well, I'll see. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Participant, I said, okay. Okay, then let me, sorry, let me just, okay. And just to wrap up this part on teachers, Amal, and I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is what I was commenting on when you lost connectivity. So so yeah, when we look at all of the responses from the teacher survey, it's interesting that the areas that teachers expressed the greatest difficulty on a scale really fell into these constructs: managing active learning, motivating learning, assessing learning, and certainly managing asynchronous learning, which, as I said, that represents learner autonomy. So it's all very, they're critical areas, and they also are more challenging areas in many ways. So we know that even with experienced teachers, and again, we have teachers with whole different ranges of experience, these are, if we really want to offer different models successfully that have the learner at the center, we will focus on these more and more. And this is what I was saying in terms of the two categories: the teaching practices that existed before, and that in terms of further development that were revealed or more revealed during this experience, and then these more specific online skills that are needed, such as online assessment. Okay, and I just wanted to wrap up this part by saying that, you know, we faced a lot of resistance. I'm sure like some of you can relate to. We faced a lot of resistance, a lot of mixed feelings early on from our learners, from our teachers, even from staff, because it was a lot and it happened quickly. And there was a real, again, in the midst of this all of this big paradigm shifts. But we always look for silver linings, and with time, although face-to-face is still very much preferred, or at least having some level of face-to-face, teachers, and we think learners as well, are more and more recognizing, first of all, that our lives are different now, and second, that there is a value, that there is value in this experience. And for teachers, I think these quotes sum up things that we've been hearing, you know, that it has expanded teachers' perspectives, experience, skills, and very importantly, it's forcing them and us and all of us to rethink our strategies, incorporating methods that we feel are effective, and new methods that has energized teaching. And we're seeing this more and more. So that's something obviously that we want to leverage, that we want to build on. So we're prepared for the future in different ways. Okay, Amal?
Okay, giving you a kind of really a quick outline of the learner's profile here. We have 145 language learners participating in this pilot study, and they range from teens to adults. And I think that at equal in terms of gender as well. And the mode of learning is really from hybrid to blended. We had actually two programs, so that I will show you how we make use of a comparison here. And all of them actually had the same intrinsic motivation of joining the course to improve their English. So pretty much we feel that this is kind of a homogeneous group of learners to draw conclusion from. Next, Elena. Okay, in terms of really analyzing the learner survey, we had a two-step analysis here. First of all, we wanted to identify top performances concluded by the learners as performances that they implemented with ease, performances that they implemented with some difficulties, with great difficulties. They didn't say that they didn't follow certain things that teachers asked them to do, but their responses ranged between they did it with ease or they did it with some difficulty or great difficulty. So first in the two-step analysis we adopted, we identified top performances in these three categories. And then the second step is to compare respondents' percentages on these identified performances between our hybrid program and blended program. Since that there are two different modes and the blended has a face-to-face component. So we reckon that by really comparing the hybrid program, which is the virtual program, to the blended program that has a face-to-face component, this could be a meaningful comparison for us. And we would highlight the significant differences between the two programs, either positive significant on the part of the blended learning or the negative differences. So for instance, under the first construct of managing e-learning, the learners under the two programs, they actually give these four performances as performances conducted with ease. Those are the top identified performances under this category. They didn't say that any of the performances under the managing e-learning construct were difficult, but we wanted to look at the percentages here. If we are setting the blended program percentages as a benchmark, we could see that there is, we wanted to highlight, for instance, that 78% only in the hybrid group were conducting group work with ease. And this is significant for us because the purpose of the pilot study is not just to evaluate what happened, but also to see why was that, just try to improve what we can possibly improve in the future rounds. So 78% when compared to the 90% in the blended program, it was identified as an area where, although that 78% of the respondents said that they performed with ease, but still it is an area that became on our list of concern for further capacity building, for further orientation, for further preparation. So this is something we learned from this two-step analysis. Next, please, Elena. Under motivation and independence, following the same two-step analysis, we identified two performances under the category of conducting performances with ease that are substantially different, not substantially different, but still we wanted to see what we can do to improve these areas, what we can do for keeping learners' motivation online, and what we can do to keep the connections and the communication with teachers to receive timely feedback to improve their English online. For the category on conducting performances with some difficulty, we could also see when we compared the hybrid performances with the blended performances, we could see that even though that they are low percentages, but still they are substantial. Like really being on time for the online classes, when the blended program respondents said that they were there on time. Hybrid program respondents, 28% of them expressed some difficulty in doing it. Completing requested tasks during the online classes. Also, there is a substantial difference here. Understanding what's required from them before the next online class. Understanding the link between the offline and the online activities. Completing the assignments before the next online classes. We wanted really to understand what we could do to enhance performances and try to eradicate difficulty for even this small percentage. But because we compared it to people who are doing the face-to-face with some asynchronous parts of the program, we realized that even though that it is not high percentage, but we want to do something to help those people. Next, please. For time commitment, actually, we realize here that this green highlighted performance really shows the impact of the online program on students, keeping a balance between their study requirements and their other work and study commitments. Like 93% of them said that they can keep this balance versus 77% in the other face-to-face. And this is no surprise, definitely. We all understand the advantage of following a program online, following a virtual training, and how much this really saves on time and effort and transportation and the time and all of that. So this is a positive area of impact. Or a positive area that we wanted to highlight, that the hybrid program, the virtual program is taken over the face-to-face or the blended program. Next, please. Again, for the use of technology, we have a positive difference and a negative difference on the part of the hybrid program. Completing and submitting work online came as a positive performance or advantages performance for the hybrid group. But the feedback on the technical problem with LMS needs some improvement here, needs to be worked out or looked at. So it is the use of technology here. Probably we need to look into more orientation, more technical support, more troubleshooting. So this was very well identified for us in this pilot study. Next, Elena. Under the construct of self-assessment and communication, while the first performance really come close for both groups, really being able to self-assess their independent work and identify when they need help, but the other two performances are substantially low, communicating with teachers when they need help and communicating with peers on joint assignments online. So these two areas, again, were highlighted for us, and we wanted to, of course, do something to improve this. Next, please. Okay, so now we are reaching some insights, conclusions, recommendations. So back to you, Elena.
Okay, yes. For this final section, of course, we wanted to share what have we learned so far. There have been many conclusions and recommendations that we see, but here's just a taste. In terms of teachers, I mean, a number of these may seem actually pretty obvious, but in implementation, maybe not so much so, in terms of how do we really address this? How do we deal with this going forward? So the face-to-face teaching experience does not transfer easily to a virtual setting. You know, we need to allow time, encourage monitoring from different stakeholders, discuss observations and ongoing development, provide feedback. There are different ways of doing that. These are things we did before, but again, we're looking at more varied strategies and involving really much more of a team approach. Okay, certain teaching constructs are more challenging to apply to virtual programs, you know, and managing active learning, motivating learners, assessing learner. Again, these are pretty high order teaching skills, and they represent, I think, a longer development process. So again, we focus a lot on teacher development and training, but we need to actually take this into account even more directly, more in different ways. We have, Amideast has its own teacher certificate program for English language teaching, the PCELT, Professional Certificate in English Language Teaching. So looking at that and many other programs we have for teachers, how do we now elements we're looking at that both mean both short-term and longer-term strategies to implement. Amal?
Yes, okay. Some conclusions from the learner survey here. We see that learners can take part in interactive activities online, but for us to ease the difficulty, they need to be oriented on certain things to ease the experience and make it really more meaningful and more smoothly running for them. They need to be oriented on what's expected from them. And we need to ensure that the system facilitates interactive learning. So these two things really make their experience more enjoyable and more interactive. As for their motivation, we also realized that they are motivated to learn online, and they could actually see some advantages of learning online. But motivation gets affected when they lack a clear understanding of what's required from them. And it should not be taken for granted that when the teacher is saying what's expected, so they would receive what's expected. So lack a clear understanding, and we would really like to highlight the word clear understanding of what's required from them, and the linkages between what they're supposed to do offline and how this is building on what they have just covered online. This is an area that feed into their motivation to continue the program online. Another area for them that really affects their motivation is the receiving timely and clear feedback on their learning. And of course, having access to technical support for their use of the online platform. Those are the 3 areas that really affect motivation here. We also realize here from the pilot study that virtual learning tends to take learners away from, this is really high potential to have a kind of a solitary work if we're not planning carefully pair and group work. So this tendency of really working on their own is there because they are on their virtual classes, and sometimes it's all up to them to really discuss, raise questions, participate in the group work. So teachers are really more than in the face-to-face. They have to really plan well pair and group work and continually facilitate this pair and group work is happening in their virtual training. Also, learners need to develop their ability to self-monitor their learning and self-assess their progress. Really, this is a very good chance for them to be self-directed learners, self-autonomous, autonomous and self-directed, but they need to be shown how to do this. They need to be trained on this. It's not really happening automatically, and it should not be taken for granted, no matter how old they are. We found this actually in both our teens and adults groups. Their need to learn how to self-monitor the learning and self-assess their progress. Next, Elena. Continuing on the conclusions, recommendations from the learner survey, it's the focus on communication channels. Probably the communication channels are there in our platform, but whether they are really well aware of these channels, whether they are competent or capable of using it or not, this is a different story. So really communication channels and orienting them and putting a strong focus to ensure communication throughout the virtual program is so important. Also, helping learners better keep a balance between training commitments and their work study has been really recognized by them. Like they know that they could keep a balance between online learning and or their commitment on the online training and their other commitments. We need to capitalize on that. We need perhaps to get the word out on that so that we encourage more learners to join online training. Learners need to be prepared also for asynchronous activities. As Elena said, we don't want them to think that we are giving them homeworks and either they will do their homeworks before their next online session or not. But asynchronous activities is part and parcel of the hybrid program. It really continues on what they are learning online. It builds on it. They are both parts of the program should be integrated towards the learning outcomes. So either in hybrid or the blended course format, we need also to prepare them for how to take their asynchronous activities. Either the technical skills that they need, how to download, upload, communicate with their teachers, do joint activities with their peers, or how to really be committed to complete their asynchronous activities. Learners can depend less on their teachers and more on themselves. This is really something that we could see this. And the proof for that is that many of them came under the 2 categories of like doing things with ease or doing things with some difficulties. So these 2 categories tell us that they can depend on themselves. On each other, and they can depend less on teachers if we plan our program this way. If we can create an online class community to encourage peer support, and we try to build all of these recommendations to foster communication, foster technical support, foster self-direction, self-monitoring, and peer support. So these are the insights that we, and the recommendation that we built on the responses from the learner survey. Elena, back to you.
And we wanted to add, again, we see this as really more and more of a team effort, and the manager's role. And here, managers, I'm using this as meaning program managers, coordinators, all those involved in the planning and implementation of different courses and programs, and those that lead that effort. So the program managers and the team have an important role in different areas, and this makes a huge difference. And we know also part of their ongoing development is to be prepared for this, okay? And they have a key role in, of course, the learner's orientation. We built that in a lot this past year, but we know that's critical, and we could add even more to that. And of course, teachers' capacity building, ongoing development, including through reflective discussions, and looking at the different types of courses and programs, the different delivery formats, the different even, you know, the different kinds of tasks and task designs, particularly for asynchronous assignments. Again, these are areas of developing skills, and it's incredibly important for our work, because we can never follow one size fits all. Like we did it once for one program, one course. Okay, let's just use that every time. No, we might be able to use it, but we probably will have to make some adjustments, adaptations. So we are building capacity, we're building resources, we're building knowledge so that we can draw from that. But then who makes those decisions? Who decides that this kind of course model works best for this group of learners? So preparing the managers, the manager team for those kinds of decisions, of course, troubleshooting learners' technical problems. It cannot be overestimated. Incredibly important to have these systems in place. And then resolving issues of access. Different people are involved in this, but I know there was a lot of troubleshooting, and will continue to be, considering our different contexts. For example, our managers or coordinators would plan course schedules or change course schedules based on when when they knew electricity would be available in some contexts, or when internet traffic would be a bit lower, so that connectivity issues were reduced, things like that. You know, access to devices in certain programs, we're able to try to help resolve this, but gathering information, especially for some of our youth programs, gathering information about the family's use of those devices, and when possible, you know, changing the schedule, and also related to that, we're looking at, you know, really being realistic and knowing that for some learners, we need to make, in a situation like this, we need to make the content, we need to make the course available offline, you know, through recordings that they can access afterwards, through offline materials that at least allows them to keep up with the content in some way. And digital literacy, that's a big issue. Again, some of our managers offered extra training, orientation to prepare for a certain English language course or a certain program. But this is, we know that this requires lots of attention and focus. And also we see our M&E efforts going forward, that they provide an opportunity to gather more data, more specific data on issues of access and equity. Again, because of the different contexts in which we work. Okay, back to you.
Okay, in the area of use of technology, our insights here are really talking about making wise decision about the default, when to use a default platform and when to use other apps. Because sometimes, like, too much technology options leave the teachers undecided what to use when, and the clarity on which to use and when. So we are providing teacher resources on using the LMS and other online apps, But we really need to talk more to teacher and build their capacity and really try out planning the lessons using different apps here. Also, establishing mechanisms for requesting technical support, communicating to learners and teachers. This is important. Technical support here is so important, just to know teachers and learners should know whom they should contact and how they should contact if they have any technical problem. And the technical support, it's needless now to say that it differs for synchronous part of the lesson and the asynchronous part of the lesson. So if students are assigned something to complete asynchronously over the weekend, they really should know whom they should contact if they have a technical problem. They should not really wait until they early in the working week to tell their teachers that they had a problem over the weekend. So very technical support for for these parts of the hybrid class needs also to be mapped out and communicated clearly to learners. Troubleshooting, and no matter what, we always need to have technical support on site. So troubleshooting technology issues with learners is so important, no matter how much we oriented them on how to use the platform. And streamlining performances, because some learners, when they know that there is a recorded session, they would say, okay, I would prefer to watch recorded session. And some of our teachers during the focus group said, we are trying to tell students that it is not about really watching the session, it's about taking part in the session. And there's a big difference. And while we are recording the session and making it available for you as a reference, but the program is about interactive participation, because you need to practice and you need to be present in our synchronous sessions. So really, it is not about learners' preference here by giving them different options, but we need to streamline this. And of course, online assessment, as Elena said, and I said, like both teachers and learners group have identified online assessment as a big, or actually the top challenging performance that they need rigorous and careful planning for. For the last part on the piloting the M&E system, really the process and the toolkit. What we did is that we put our M&E system into piloting just to listen from teachers. Is it feasible to monitor, to use a monitoring checklist? Was it really useful for teachers to use the monitoring checklist as they are building their online capacities? Whether it is feasible for the managers to observe teachers and monitor them using this checklist, whether was it really useful to have virtual program monitoring checklist, and we realized that it was feasible. I mean, the whole system that we put into piloting the M&E system is a feasible system for piloting virtual training programs with all its different toolkits. And we can also adapt this system for other programs, for other beyond the EL programs. We can actually keep a core toolkit. We can adapt to translated toolkits in different languages. We can make shorter survey version for young learners, but we can adapt the toolkit and the system now that we know that it is feasible and it's needed and it's perceived as a useful M&E system for our virtual programs. So our insight here is we need to continue the monitoring and evaluation of virtual programs to boost ongoing learning. So it is not something that we are doing as we are transmitting to online context. And it is not something that we are planning to do only for the first couple of rounds. But we need to continue monitoring and evaluating to boost ongoing learning. This is learning expected with every round of online programs, and we would like to be there to capture it.
And I would just like to add, before we move to our questions, I just want to add that as we sit here on June 1st, 2021, and are facing now our summer, are preparing for our summer programs. And then of course, our offices are also preparing for the fall. which is generally a busy time, the fall sessions. We're seeing that that in some places, various places, things are opening up. Hopefully there will be some return to normalcy, quote unquote. And so that's important to consider, but we know that we need to be ready for different options, different models, more flexibility. So this experience certainly fits within that.
Okay, we actually had prepared some questions to generate discussion. So we would like to put our first question on the screen here, and then we look into we will look at the chat because I realize that there are a couple of questions here. But the first question, just to try to set the mindset for questions here. Here is again our list of constructs that we selected for our pilot study. Could you go back to the first?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
There you go.
What else, if you would like to pose some questions for us, we'd like to hear from you in regard to what else should we look at in monitoring and evaluating virtual learnings, apart from these constructs. Of course, some of these constructs we will still doing it in our upcoming rounds of our virtual programs. But would you advise us also to look at other constructs for learners or for teachers? Would like to hear from you on that. If you would like to type up your answers, if you'd like to unmute yourself, our colleague Ayub here would allow you to be unmuted and share your insights with us.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, while you are getting ready to be unmuted, I would like to pose on some of the questions that you already shared in the chat. Helena, we have a question from David saying, while some beneficiaries may have lost some content during the online learning experience, have you noted any gains in other skills such as adaptability, collaboration, and problem solving?
That's an excellent question, really excellent. And I think, well, through this experience, through the pilot study, but also through our own, interaction with our students, our teachers, and then feedback that teachers give us, I think there has been other gains for sure. Some of them hard to measure so far, but we see, for example, we go in and out of these classrooms in different ways, the way we did with face-to-face classes. But in terms of online, it's even easier to do that. And the students' adaptability, their willingness to take part in different kinds of activities, in group work through through breakout rooms, they're so quick at learning and using different tools, and doing assignments in different ways, and managing their time differently. Again, this was rougher at the beginning, or maybe rougher to capture, but now we see it much more consistently. And our teachers, we had like our focus group that involved some teachers from Lebanon, some of whom have been teaching for a long time, and some of whom are more comfortable with maybe a bit more of a traditional approach, say it's amazing what I'm able to do with my students now. And it's amazing how they're responding. It's amazing how they are, through this experience, becoming more independent. So I think it's such an important thing to consider in terms of the students' own development in different areas.
That's right. That's right. And even I think that the nature of the experience itself, this virtual experience, I think that put them in the responsibility seats, and they would rely on each other for some collaboration and some complementary work here. We have another question from Joseph about timing. I think that he was commenting when we were presenting learners survey responses that learners said that they have some difficulty being committing on time. And he said that's surprising about the times. I would assume it to be much higher. Did they identify why being on time was difficult? Internet issues, forget about class times? It could be both, actually. This is a good question. It could be both. It could be internet issues, yes, but the question was specifically asking about being committed throughout the program. So it was actually the problem with commitment rather than connectivity. But the second possibility that you mentioned in your question, Joseph, could be a valid answer. Forget about class times. It could be, especially that perhaps they are not putting it on their calendar, or they are not linking it to their online calendar. I don't know. We didn't really dig deep into it. But probably because this is the very first time that they are committed to an online program. I don't know even whether they are having kind of a fixed time or they are changing the time. I don't know, but this is an area that's worthy of investigation, further investigation. Unless Elena has some question, some further answer to this question.
No, I agree. Yes, absolutely. And if you noticed, Katinka has added some ideas here in terms of what else to look at in monitoring, evaluating virtual learning. Mm-hmm. So very interesting points. Actual learning and use of learning, also required to disaggregate results by gender, age, and other factors. And then further down, comparing self-evaluation with an objective assessment and comparing results, measuring confidence. Very interesting, yeah.
Interesting, yes, yes.
Amal, I don't know if you want to comment on that as our meal expert.
Well, yes, I think that, yes, of course, these are really at the heart of the e-learning constructs here. And I think that, again, it emphasizes what we've been saying, that perhaps we would like to build more around self-evaluation and compare perhaps teachers' assessment of the learner's performance to their own assessment of their own performance. Perhaps we can build on this comparison. Confidence is this for sure, could be also something that worthy of looking at. And of course, it could be actually something that we can draw on the motivation part, like we try to assess their motivation and independence. Whether one of the impediment is self-confidence, it could be an impacting factor here that we can look at, these two areas, yes.
And I have to add, you know,
areas, yeah.
And I have to add, Katinka, that confidence is something we talk about a lot, of course. And of course, now with this experience, you know, the confidence of handling these new modes of learning and new experiences. But for me, I think that's an area, and maybe this will force us to do that. I think this is an area that we could also define better. It's like engagement. You know, we always target, of course, greater student engagement and a greater learner confidence. I was just reading an article this past week, I think it was from Middle Web or something, in which they asked that question, but how do we define engagement, like confidence? And do we as educators, do we all understand it the same way? Like engagement, you can break down into, in this article anyway, into what was it, behavioral engagement, emotional engagement, cognitive engagement. Not to complicate it too much, but how do we make it more measurable? And then your point here, of course, in then linking the self-evaluation with a different kind of objective assessment, and where does confidence fit into that? Anyway.
Yeah, and I think that also we receive from the audience here, again, Katinka says that they already implemented this comparison between self-assessment and objective assessment. And they found that participants turn up to be modest in their self-assessment. And probably a factor about really confidence here, and that when they are really self-assessing themselves, they really shouldn't underestimate their performance. So this is kind of like really it goes together, their confidence that they can self-assess themselves and they don't have to be modest in self-assessing themselves.
Wonderful. We're just about out of time.
Yeah.
We just had, I'll just put one more question and then maybe we have a time for any other questions that people have. We wanted to ask what aspects of our pilot project, if any are relevant for your own situations. And then I'll go ahead and put the next, because I think the next one's also sort of related and good for reflection for all of us. How can we continue learning from these transitions and paradigm shifts in order to improve e-learning programs? Okay. And Joe said the checklist. You see that the checklist would be relevant for your own situation. Okay.
You mean the monitoring checklist?
Yeah.
Yes, many of the teachers that we met with in the focus group said that this is the first time that we have a monitoring checklist for virtual programs. Because usually in pedagogy, we have fit checklists for like planning, for lesson plans, but this is the first time that we have a checklist for monitoring virtual classrooms, yes, or virtual programs, yes.
Okay. Well, here's Katinka question.
We have a question here.
Yeah.
We're really interested to know whether indeed even from face-to-face training is possible again. We might still go for more blended options as we learned so much from these during the pandemic. Would you like to take this, Elena? I think you have a lot to say.
I agree completely, you know, and I'm an old school face-to-face person, but what we've learned from this that we couldn't have predicted is really incredible, including just really different benefits, different gains for both learners and teachers. And again, how do we make use of this? We feel that going forward for sure. We were already working on different blended models, but you know, it's certainly this whole the whole focus changed dramatically. So I agree with you, Katinka. You know that we going forward, we see that you know the face-to-face needs to be there, but alongside that, making available blended options for different reasons. We can also it can also, of course, be convenient for more of our learners in terms of the hybrid experience. You know, we have offices often usually in capital cities, but we can reach people more easily throughout our countries, different countries throughout the region. So I think it's a core question to look at. How do we build on our experience moving forward?
Yeah.
Thanks.
We don't want to miss what David again said, that he said that these gains are very relevant for learning in the 21st century as change is inevitable. So now that it came out as really something of relevance to what we are doing in the 21st century, because active learning and student-centered and flipped classrooms are proved to be very kind of like needed approaches, even for the 21st century programs. So we are trying to dig deep into the constructs that maintain this even in our virtual programs.
Any final questions or comments? Thank you, David. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Totally
different
agree.
Students thrive in these new learning environments. Yes, agreed.
Okay. Shall we turn on our videos now, just to say we just really wanted to thank everyone for attending the session and for really playing a very active role. All your questions and comments and everything that you also give us some good ideas and insights as well. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And, oh, I should put up the last slide. There are email addresses for sure. If you, again, if you want to be in touch with us directly and have other questions, you're more than welcome. It's a community after all. And
the virtual community.
Yes, David, we can send you a copy of the slides. Absolutely. If you'll email one of us with your email address, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Laila, yes, great.
Yeah, just send us an
Okay.
email. We can send it to you via email. Yes.
I'd be happy to share.
Okay.
All right.
So that's it actually for the time of the session. Thank you very much for your participation. We look forward to seeing you sometime again in our professional circles.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.